Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast. And welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Who here has experimented with sleep deprivation? A couple of years ago, I began gradually cutting sleep. When usually I would sleep 8 to 9 hours a night, I started staying up later and later to read and shit like that. Eventually, I was getting just a handful of hours of sleep. Not terrible, but over time, it started building up. Not even in a way where I could tell that it was because of the sleep loss. Getting the gradual loss gave the hallucinations a kind of subtlety that I hadn't experienced before. I started hearing things in the walls. Not anything big or strange, just constant faint sounds of crawling insects. Whenever I let a shadow fall across my bare skin, I could feel things crawling on me. The worst part was when I would read text. Keep in mind, this didn't happen often and always caught me off guard. I would sometimes see a word that was actually completely different. When I would look at it a second time, the word changed back to its original state. So, things like, "Today I went to town." I would occasionally read as "Today I went to hell." Probably didn't help that I was typically staying up late to read Lovecraft. Anyway, anyone got sleep deprivation stories?
Hello/X/ I am fairly new to 4chan and how things are done with it, but I assume that some of you guys could look into what I'm going to state here. My alias is Fearkin. I had begun a research on sleep deprivation and the long-term effect of it. I went about it by getting only 3 hours of sleep every night for as long as I could last. I lasted about 7 months and quit it somewhere around the beginning of May, if I recall correctly. However, the research was not in vain and got very unsettling at times. I kept weekly notes in my computer for the summaries of each day within that week and how I felt, what it felt like, and so on. It went like this. During the first month, I felt very tired. Time felt slow, and sometimes I could hardly use any excess energy for running. Other than that, I felt fine. The second month seemed a bit more natural. Things were going smoothly, and I was more used to my sleeping habits. It almost felt normal, but I was still cautious about what I did. Since I was 2 months in, I didn't want to screw up only a measly 2 months in, so I would preserve energy so that I wouldn't crash at an earlier point during any night. The third month was a bit different. I felt a huge lack of self-esteem and would go as far as calling myself idiotic out loud with my friends. They didn't like me for that, but thank God the month passed by quickly. I still was a tiny bit depressed at times during the 4 months, but about a week or so in, I went back to normal. It was becoming less winter-like, so I had to do some chores. One time I had been outside to rake my yard. Took a long time, but I did it. However, one thing that really caught me off guard was one time when I had turned around to start the next row to rake, I saw a tall, dark figure go across my yard at a pretty fast speed. It didn't have anything to define it as anything, but it did look blurry, or as if it was emitting some black powder or something. I have more to post, but I want to hear what you guys think so far. Alright, so allow me to continue. I hadn't seen many illusions or anything in my 5th month, but it really escalated. About a week in, I began to hear a voice, a girl's voice. It would be as if someone huddled over my shoulder and spoke incomprehensible words. It wasn't English, and it hardly had any identifiable points to see it as another language. 2 weeks into this month, I would begin to hear the voice on almost a daily basis. She would speak to me in a hushed voice as if trying to tell me something important, but I could never understand it. It worried me some, but I tried what I could to ignore it. Now, this is where things started to get to my head. In the 6th month, I was on spring break. I remember on a Thursday night when I went to sleep, I dreamt of coming outside a red building at night. It was rainy and I would look to my left to see a hooded girl peering from around an alley. I would chase after her. At the end of the dream, we would both stop. I would ask, "Who are you?" to get a reply of "Someone you'll know." The hooded girl had the same voice as the one in my head. She wore black attire with the hoodie. I never saw her face, but I could see her smirk and her long hair flowing from out of the hoodie. This dream went on for about a week, but the difference was, unlike the first dream, I would chase her through alleyways rather than a building. However, it would always end the same way. The 6th month was the creepiest. Near the beginning of the 3rd week, I would hang out with my friends. We would always go to a park at night so we could either drive his car in the lot or walk on the nature trail close to it. I forgot to mention that in the 4th month I saw another black-figured illusion, or what I perceived to be an illusion. Could have just been trees. But we were beginning to walk on the trail. 2 of my friends didn't want to go for some reason, but I really wanted to. So my other friend and I went to walk on it until we got close to the foresty area. I stopped and felt a huge presence, and I looked to my left towards some trees on a hillside to see the dark figure staring down on me. I stared at it for a moment, trying to get a better look at it, but then I saw it slowly turn and bend its knee as if it were trying to strafe around me. The figure wasn't close, of course. It was at the top of the hillside, and I was a good 50 to 90 meters from it. It turned, and I freaked out almost instantly and began to run. My friend looked back at me and told me I was being a coward, and he proceeded to walk into the trail. About 2 minutes later, I see him running out of it. I asked him what happened, and he stated that he heard footsteps and snow crunching near some of the trees. We still haven't spoken about it since then. He probably forgot about it by now since it happened in January. As I was saying, I proceeded more into the 6th month into the 7th before stopping. Nearing the end of the 6th month, me and my friends were out at the park again. While we were playing our usual game of manhunt, I was hunting everyone else. I got 2 of my 3 friends and I was looking for the 3rd. I was walking around before I noticed something albino looking slouched over by a tree. I froze up, wondering if it was my friends or something else. It jolted its head to look at me with its leering green eyes. I yelled out loud, "Oh shit," and turned instantly and ran. I ran to the car before my friends met me there asking what was wrong, and I felt insane. My friends weren't believing me, so after a calming 5 minutes, I had them with me to go see what that thing was. You know the rake, right? It basically looked very similar to that, except with its appendages being more twistedly long and more bony. We looked for it, but of course we found nothing. My friends worried for me for a while. I was dead silent for the rest of the night. I'll get to the 7th month soon. The 6th still has a bit more to offer. Anyways, covering the last month, I was still feeling depressed about nothing. I was going over everything that has been happening to see if I had any leads about how to go about my situation. I was going to the extent of being alone, being antisocial, and telling my friends that I wasn't what they thought I was. Although I could cover all of my notes, I didn't have anything else to do but wait and keep going at it with the same plan. About half of a week later, I dreamt of the girl again. This time it was like the first, except when I chased her up the staircase in the building. It ended and she was nowhere to be found. I saw a mirror at the wall in front of me and approached it. As I did, I didn't see my own reflection clearly, but I saw the girl behind me holding a machete or something. She cut off my right arm, but I didn't bleed or feel it. Rather than bleeding, I was emitting a black powder from where my arm was. I looked in the mirror to see that girl put her arm over my shoulder and say, "There is nothing left. Cast off your mask and show your true colors." After she said that, the mirror showed me with a mortifying smile on my face, just staring blankly back at me. In the dream, I knew I wasn't smiling when seeing the reflection. Sadly, I don't have much more to cover. The 7th month felt painful. I was always fatigued and tired. I did everything I could to try and figure out what to do, but I was at my knees with this. I had to stop before I would go into a state of insanity I might not be able to recover from. So I stopped sometime in the middle of May. It has been about an entire month since then, and I noticed one thing. I can't remember anything I ever posted about online, on Skype, on darn well everything, so I can barely imagine how I may have acted. I'm obligated to go see what I might have said, but I'd rather not go digging up what I'm trying to bury. However, I don't think I have a choice anymore. About 2 weeks ago, I had my first visual hallucination of the hooded girl. It scares me to say that it was while me and my friends were on the nature trail again. They saw a huge change from how I acted before compared to then, so I didn't mention seeing her until later. But the hallucination depicted her walking peacefully with her hands behind her back holding each other. I saw her for a couple seconds, then blinked and she was gone. I honestly think that stopping the research had no effect, and I'm really stressed since I feel like I've been being watched since then. I can probably forget about it in due time, but it is just embedded in my head for the time being.
How normal are you now on a scale of 1 to 10, OP?
I feel much more better than what I was like during the lack of sleep. Since I stopped, I feel like I can think more clearly, and I feel like the way I was before I started the research. I haven't really felt sad or depressed since then, so probably an 8 or 9, just a bit weirded out by the experience.
OP, you understand. This is the first step down the rabbit hole. I'm gonna tell you now. You won't escape until you find out what is what and why. Running from it will cause you nothing but trouble and sadness, also possible death. Now I'm gonna say something you may not believe in. The supernatural, it's real, all of it. It just takes mental conditioning to actually see the world around you as it really is, because your mind filters out a lot of what you see, because it cannot filter what it sees correctly, and everything that is an aberration is automatically purged and removed. Once your mind is more relaxed, this filtering of the world is also more lax, and like the rest of the world, stuff doesn't usually act on what people do until you interact with it in some way, shape, and form. Since you interact with the underbelly of the world interacts with you now, whether or not you believe so. The worst part is you cannot just run from it, because you have become part of the dark side of terra firma now, and running only makes it worse and shortens the lifespan of not just you, but everyone you interact with. This is the problem with a hell of a lot of occultists. They see something they don't like, then run, threatening everyone they have ever done anything with in the process.
So you are encouraging me to keep at it or else I'll die sooner?
Pretty much it's the only way to go, because once you start screwing with forces you don't understand, you should probably try to figure out what you have done or are doing. Also, it's not just you I'd be worried about. Those friends you started dragging into the supernatural mess you got yourself in by pursuing and actively dragging them into. They will also probably need to actually look into it. Pretty much it's like the equivalent of a bear hibernating. If you woke it, you should probably do something about it. Like try not to die, and try to help people with you on the ride as well.
When I was 8 years old, my parents took a vacation to Catalina Island, Mexico. Me and my brothers couldn't go, so we had to stay at separate aunts' houses for a month. So I had been to my aunt's before plenty of times, but I've never stayed the night. And I've never seen anything out of the ordinary until that month. I had to sleep on the couch in the living room. When I laid down on the couch, the back would always be to my right because I sleep on my left side. A vertical window was always at my feet, and a TV slightly to the left of it. All the time at 3 a.m., the TV would either go statusy or just shut off completely on its own. And weirdly, it would always start to work fine again at 4 a.m. Even more creepy, there was this eerie white horizontal mist that would always pass in front of the window in front of me. The mist would move from right to left every 10 seconds or so on point, kinda like it was circling the house at the same speed all night. I've heard that 3 a.m. is when the lining between our world and the spirit world is its thinnest. It's called the witching hour, and I didn't learn that till several years after my experience. That would act up for the entirety of that hour, then be perfectly fine. If anyone has any idea WTF I experienced with that white mist, that'd be awesome.
Just thinking about these experiences makes me shiver. They're not that creepy. But the fact that I still live in my parents' house where they happened makes it scary. I must have been around 10 years old at the time. I used to share a bedroom with my brother who was around 18. We slept on the same bed and all. Since I was younger, I always went to bed earlier, and sometimes my mother would peek on me to check if I was already sleeping. If I was sleeping, she'd slowly pull me off my bed and carry me into her bed so I'd sleep there. If I wasn't already sleeping, I'd pretend to be sleeping anyways. But one time, something strange happened. As usual, I was half asleep during the entire experience of being carried from one bed to another, but it still makes no sense how I ended up in my mother's bed when no one in my household remembered carrying me that night. I remember being carried through the hallway by my stepfather. I had my eyes closed the entire time, but I could tell it was him by the way he was carrying me. He put me next to my mother and left the bedroom. Then, with my mother sleeping next to me, I looked around the bedroom, and that's when I saw it. To this day, I still think it was a shapeshifter. I saw my mother standing in front of the bed, carrying a child in her arms and smiling at me innocently. I knew it wasn't my mother since I could see her sleeping next to me from the corner of my eye. It was the first time I felt myself frozen in fear. Some people say they can feel the being's intentions when encountered. whether it is evil or good. I felt something similar to that. I felt as if it was a neutral entity as long as I played along with it, and I also felt like it'd turn evil if I wouldn't play along. I specifically felt that it would abduct me in that case. I followed my instinct and pretended it was my mother, like I couldn't see anything wrong with the situation. I returned a smile to it and quickly laid my head on the pillow. I spent that entire night with my eyes closed. The next morning, my mother asked me if I had a nightmare since I came to her bed by myself. I told her that I didn't have any nightmares and that I was stepfather carried me to her bed. But apparently, he spent that entire night working, and neither my mother or brother carried me that night.
I have often stayed up for hours and even days at a time. I remember reading an article about how prolonged sleep deprivation will result in, say, a 30 to 50% higher chance of heart attack. I was also warned by others about this. One night as I was trying to get to sleep, I couldn't help but remember that article and what had been said to me beforehand. Combined with heart spasms in the past and close shaves with heart failure, I was in such a state of terror that I experienced a psychotic break. I remember as I was laying in bed that everything had a reddish tint to it, and there was a sentient trumpet floating in the air. The trumpet played a few unpleasant, distorted notes to mock my fear and my, seemingly, imminent death. I remember feeling vaguely angry with it. That's the way I can describe it. It was just not even really anger for the most part. Just such a hollow, weak anger. Nothing like how I would normally feel when angry, let alone if I was being mocked on the verge of death. I suppose you could call it a shallow or flat emotion. Supposedly, it's a big thing in schizophrenia. I would prefer to feel that kind of anger over normal instances unless I needed to not. I'm tempted to agree with John Forbes Nash Jr. in that madness can be an escape.
I was really screwed up a few years ago and had auditory, visual, and even sensory hallucinations. I would see a pale ghost woman in the corner of my eyes, and more often than not she would tap on my shoulders. I am sure I made many people think I was schizo by suddenly turning around shocked in public. She was the only hallucination I had, though, and it makes me wonder if I just went mad or if, through my self-destructive tendencies and sleep deprivation, I was able to pierce the veil. 0 out of 10 would not recommend. I still see shadow people from time to time, but a few years ago I was doing fake Adderall, which is just meth, and I would stay up for 4 days at a time before getting only a few hours of sleep, then blazing through another 4 days. I did this for damn nearly 2 years, and I vividly remember the transition I went through where the visions and hallucinations steadily got stronger. I was hearing voices, seeing flicks of movement in the corner of my eyes, and constantly in a paranoid state thinking something or someone was following me. But 2 times in particular stand out to me over all the rest. It's easy to label hallucinations from sleep deprivation as nothing more than our mind playing tricks on us and devolving into a psychosis, so going into my meth binge I knew I would eventually experience it. Naturally, I wrote off much of what I heard and saw, simply artifacts of the drug use. Until I witnessed an all-white entity leaning into my doorway, looking at me. I knew it was female for some reason, like the information just immediately popped in my head when I noticed it. The behavior was in line with typical shadow people. Whenever I looked at it, they disappeared. But this was totally different. When I looked away, she reappeared, her upper body peeking out from behind the doorway. And it was all white. I think I might have seen some black hair, but I was never able to look directly at it. It was just a bright white humanoid figure. Every other shadow person has always been black, like a shadow, and wispy like smoke. Also, whenever you look at a regular shadow person and they disappear, they don't immediately come back. So this terrified me, and even right now I'm getting scared writing about it because I'm looking at the same door. Thankfully, I'm blessed and protected by Jesus Christ, so nothing can hurt me unless God wills it. But it's still very unsettling. I had another experience where instead of seeing something, I felt it. But that's a story for another time.
I went 5 days with less than 8 hours of sleep total, staying up all day and night for the first 3 days. This was freshman year of college during my hell week of pledging and midterms. I also played a sport for my university, rowing, and had been taking Adderall, Concerta to help me study, stay awake, and for energy. Safe to say, I had been putting my body through hell with everything on top of morning and afternoon practices. The weird part that I found about sleep deprivation was the longer I stayed awake, the easier it became to deprive myself of sleep. In the end, when I was finally allowed to get unhindered rest, I found myself unable to fall asleep and actually became scared that I had permanently fucked up my sleep cycle, and even found myself believing I might never be able to sleep again. I may have been manic or slightly insane at this point. However, something I will remember forever. On the 5th day that morning, I had practice as usual. It was still dark out, and I remember looking at the sky. The sun was just under the horizon, making the clouds visible, and I remember seeing rippling waves, which I described looking like an aurora borealis all over the sky. I asked teammates to look and see if they could see the same thing, but they couldn't. This was the first and only hallucination I had ever seen in my life.
Sleep deprivation leads to hallucinations. Randy Gardner, PIC-related, holds the record for the longest time without sleep, 11 days. He had friends sleep in cycles at his place, so there would always be someone to help keep him awake. He tried to stand as much as possible. Early on, he experienced extreme nausea. His organs were struggling to function. His heart and lungs felt weak. Later into this experiment, he experienced extremely vivid hallucinations, visual and auditory. World record for sleep deprivation is no longer a thing due to the severe health risks. The longest I've ever gone without sleep was 3 or 4 days. I remember on the last day I was standing in the woods smoking a cigarette and saw chimpanzees swinging from the trees, which is strange since I live in England. I would hear people screaming my name. Sometimes it felt like the voice was right next to my ear. I would hear footsteps and voices in my house. I was losing touch with reality. Why does this occur? Some sleep deprivation symptoms have been compared to Alzheimer's or dementia, and a lot of people report the same feeling the further they go into sleep deprivation. Why does the mind turn against itself when it's deprived of sleep? Why do we see and hear things that aren't really there? Do you think this is paranormal? Do living things need to sleep to not only keep our bodies functioning, but our souls as well? Would be interested in hearing your theories.
I suffer insomnia and periodically suffer from debilitating sleep deprivation. It sort of sneaks up on you because it's not like you haven't rested. You were just lying down as opposed to sleeping. As a result, you're not physically tied, but gradually you start losing concentration, you suffer micro-sleeps, your short-term memory starts messing up. That's when shit gets weird. Often I can't separate memories from dreams. I go to get something from the fridge and I can't find it. Did I already eat that or did I buy it in a dream? These episodes present sort of like intrusive thoughts. I keep thinking I've ordered stone pavers for my garden, but they never arrive. And I never really have enough confidence to actually order them because whenever I try, the idea of ordering them becomes way too close to the memory of ordering them. I try really, really hard not to do things I dreamed and hallucinated doing. After several days without sleep, I suffer from auditory hallucinations. It's like I'm hearing my memories as real sounds. It's not like I'm hearing voices. There's nothing sentient about them, it's just sort of like remembering a sound I heard earlier. But this is seriously disturbing when I hear a memory of a dead person talking, or when I'm in a space another person wouldn't physically fit into, like the shower. As a result, I avoid enclosed spaces, so it starts to affect my behavior as I try to use actions to maintain my sanity. Then I start garbling my speech and people start to recoil from me like I'm mad, when really I just can't put words together. It starts swapping the first sound in words, progresses to improper hyphenation, and then manifests in bizarre sentence structure. And by that point, I'm talking total gibberish. It doesn't matter how many times I try to rearrange it, just doesn't work. So I have mnemonic mantras to recite to keep my phonemes in order. Then the drugs come into it. First, it's just drugs to help me sleep, but the problem is, for my purposes, knocking myself out doesn't qualify as sleep. You'd knock a meth addict out while they came down, but I'd just wake up even more exhausted. Then there's drugs for the physical symptoms of insomnia, antacids for my stomach, anti-anxiety drugs, pills for my heart to stop arrhythmias, nausea pills. I don't want to take any drugs, but these ones I physically need. The side effects, however, can be very strange, and at this point it's hard to know what's the insomnia and what's the drugs. Then comes the uniform. People often think I'm taking drugs. They report me to police. Trained people see me blindly punching my ticket and think I'm on drugs. I get asked to leave places for no reason and sometimes thrown out onto the street when I refuse. There's no explaining to these people that I'm just sleep deprived. Often I tell them I'm a shift worker because this kind of sleep deprivation is at least understood by cops and the like. Often police seize my heart pills, which aren't for emergency use anyway, so I don't really care. I'm terrified I'll be dragged to an insane asylum and they won't let me out. There's nothing they can do for me there. But I've heard horror stories of them sedating people for weeks on end without even bothering to get the person's medical records or let them call family or a lawyer or anything. I've seriously considered having my medical number and insomnia chronic condition tattooed on myself so those fuckwits in inpatient would have no excuse.
I can share my only encounter with a sleep deprivation hallucination. It had been about a week with only a few hours of sleep. I don't remember why. Either too much games or just sleeping badly. I was in the car with a friend who was driving. We were going down a normal road, no dark lanes, and suddenly I saw a woman jogging towards us, like she was just out for a jog. When I saw her, I knew that if my friend didn't swerve, he'd hit her. Came around a corner. I was immediately filled with that sense of total and utter fear that we're about to hit someone in the car. I was too scared to speak and flinched, which made me blink and then no jogging woman. My friend asked me what was wrong, but I just shrugged it off. Still weirds me out to this day.
I know it's not particularly healthy, but it does dissolve the ego, right? I've been up for 2.5 days due to constantly finding myself unable to sleep. And when I finally feel sleepy, I'm supposed to be at work a couple hours later. I can't wait for the weekend. Anyways, time isn't making any sense right now. I had a phone call with somebody which felt like 5 or 10 but was 50 minutes long. I went into a store after work to hand in a resume, and I felt like I was in there for 40 minutes. When I walk around, it feels like I am moving underwater, like I can feel the pool of oxygen I am currently submerged in. I've had ego transcendence before from meditation, but like many, I cannot remember so clearly what went on when it happened. Anyone here had ego transcendence and more feelings of oneness while deprived of sleep? How long and what did you experience? I feel like my pineal gland is very active. Different parts of my brain feel like they're lighting up, and I feel like I've taken the back seat of my mind. I too feel less attached to my belongings right now. I'm holding onto my phone and wallet less tightly. Usually I suspect that at any time someone could pinch them, so they stay in my pockets and I check them usually. Now, on a bus, my wallet is just laying loosely in my lap. Coca-Cola tastes like pure sugar water with no flavor. I once felt this same way when in a 23-hour fast I broke it with shit food as an experiment, and everything tasted bland and boring. My memory is wiping itself every 20 seconds. Am I in for a hell of a night? Don't really want to go to the astral plane tonight because I have work tomorrow. But I don't want to miss this opportunity either. Moments this strong are very rare, and I find as soon as I resist to them, the jig is up. On a lighter note, if I sleep now, I will be late for work tonight. What can I do to keep myself from burning energy and keep myself awake? I'm just dreaming in a waking state, aren't I? Gonna go home and flick light switches to see if I'm in a dream or not. If I'm in the dream, then why am I even making this thread? Haha, this could be my first lucid dream, and now I've acknowledged the lights. They will work because I'm envisioning how they work. Where am I? Everything seems real enough, but slightly fake and uncanny. I walked past a guy yesterday who looked exactly like the insomniac dude from Fight Club, Edward Norton. Maybe it was a sign, another synchronicity, especially since I am unable to sleep. And I keep thinking about the opening scenes of Fight Club where he's in the workplace. What came first, the insomnia or the thinking about Fight Club's narrator? God, I'd love to create a Tyler Durden in my head. Then I could be free. Which is also funny. I am losing my connection to material things. Just like the movie, please don't take these as some random stoner thoughts or some shit. I'm actually going through this, and I feel like I'm warped in a mind maze, but with an underlying objective reality that is being squished and squashed as I continue through time at very inconsistent speed. Slow then fast, slow then fast. Fuck me.
OP. When you sleep, you create a connection that allows you to travel into the fifth dimension, a place where thoughts, feelings, imagination become a reality. Naturally, under sleep deprivation, you slowly begin to create that connection as a part of your life, almost becoming permanent. The sad part is, when you pay off your sleep debt, the connection snaps. Most, if not all of the time you're not able to connect fully, your thoughts and feelings won't have as powerful an effect as it would in your dreams simply because the connection is half-assed, you're only half asleep. Simply the initial trigger to your hallucinations was clearly fear. You feared something rather minor, perhaps a girl, and this snowballed into the fifth dimension and materialized. Now, whilst this could be bad, maintaining a largely positive attitude during this period can bring wonderful effects. For example, if you simply thought of being rich, sitting in a hot tub full of women, holding a wallet full of cash and looking upon your $50 million mansion, the fifth dimension is usually more than happy to accommodate and quickly begins to manifest this into your life. OP, you have breached the barrier, you can never seal it, enter the dream world.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more Greentext will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.